Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to the North Dakota Legislative Webinar. We are very happy and we are very excited to partner with the League of Women Voters of North Dakota. They were gracious enough to come and help us learn more about the North Dakota Legislative Assembly. So we appreciate everybody coming out tonight, hanging out with us and taking time to learn about the lawmaking process here in North Dakota. And hopefully by the end of the night, you will all be able to have some tools and resources to get involved in the legislature and help build your confidence up and get out there and engage the public officials and legislators all across the state. So I just want to do a quick introduction of all of our panelists who are available on the webinar tonight. Our first panelist is Charnel Seaboy. Charnel, feel free to come off the camera and wave at the participants tonight. Charnel is our field organizer here at North Dakota Native Vote. She will be doing a presentation on the structure of the legislature. Our second panelist is yours truly. My name is Devereaux Yellow Earring, and I am the field director here at North Dakota Native Vote. And then our third panelist that we have tonight is Whitney Oxendahl. She is with the League of Women Voters. Thank you, Whitney, for coming on tonight. She's going to be walking us through a live demonstration of the legislative website, which we are really excited about. So thank you, Whitney. And our final panelist is Mr. Don Morrison. Don Morrison is our legislative coordinator. He is working with North Dakota Native Vote during this legislative session and bringing his experience and expertise with the legislature to all of us tonight. So Don will be available during the question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So thankful to have Don as a part of our team and as part of our event tonight. So thank you, Don. So I will pass it over to Charnel. Charnel is going to open up our webinar this evening with her presentation on the North Dakota Legislative Overview. So Charnel, I will pass it over to you and you are free to present.
Hello, everyone. Like Devereaux said, my name is Charnel Seaboy. So I'll be discussing the legislative structure, the purpose of a legislator, and the process of lawmaking. The first section is a legislative structure. And the Legislative Assembly consists of 47 legislative districts across the state. Each legislative district elects 2 representatives and 1 senator. So there's a total of 47 senators and 94 House Representatives. Okay, so the legislative session timeline. The session began on January 23rd of this year. It lasts 80 days. So the last day will be Friday, April 28th. And the Legislative Assembly meets every odd year. So the next session will be 2025. And just a quick fun fact, North Dakota is one of 4 states that meets every odd year. So North Dakota was admitted into the Union on November 2nd, 1889. The longest serving legislator in North Dakota is Brynhild Haugland. She actually served for 52 years. And recently there was a ballot measure that was passed to limit the terms for governor and legislators, and the term limit is now 8 years. This year, we actually have 2 Native Americans in the legislature. We have Representative Lisa Finley DeVille. She's District 4A. She's from Fort Berthold, and she's on 2 standing committees, the Finance and Taxation and the Agriculture. And we also have Representative Jamie Davis. Jamie's from District 9A of the Turtle Mountains, and she is on 3 committees. So the Procedural Committee for Employment, the Standing Committee for Human Services, and the Political Subdivisions. Okay, now I will be talking about the purpose of a legislator, and I'll be discussing their roles and responsibilities. All elected North Dakota legislators, they're governed by the state constitution, the state century code, and the state administrative code. They also go through like orientation and committee assignments as well. They're there to help create laws by preparing and introducing bills. They're assigned to various committees, And there are actually 14 standing committees in the Senate and 14 standing committees in the House of Representatives. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the process of lawmaking and how a bill becomes a law. So bill preparation and introduction. The North Dakota Legislative Council acts as a nonpartisan staff to draft bills for members of the Legislative Assembly. So in some cases, there's state agencies, state boards, and state commissions that can introduce a bill as well. And after the opening session, the Lieutenant Governor or Speaker of the House calls for an introduction of bills in each chamber. The deadline to introduce bills is January 15th for representatives, and senators are January 23rd. Bill numbers and committee assignments. So once a bill is submitted, the bill clerk assigns a 4-digit bill number, and House bills start with number 1 and Senate bills start with number 2. After a bill is assigned a number, the first reading of the bill title has been heard. The bill is assigned to a corresponding House or Senate committee based on that subject matter. Public hearings and committee recommendations. So upon arriving in a committee, the bill receives a public hearing. Now, the public hearing typically includes an explanation of the bill, input from the public, and committee discussion. And after receiving that public input, the committee makes a recommendation on those bills, and that's known as a do pass, do not pass, or it can be referred to another committee. Calendar placement, amendments, and floor debates. So all bills, regardless of the committee recommendation, will be placed on the calendar for final passage or to be defeated. After bills are referred out of the committee and the amendments have all been accepted, it will receive a do pass or do not pass recommendation. So then it goes to the floor of the original chamber to be voted on by all members of the House or Senate. Our legislators advocate for the defeat or passage of the bill in their respective chambers. Then we'll move into consideration and second consideration. So after the floor debate has concluded, members will vote to either pass or defeat a bill. If a bill is defeated, it does not proceed any further through the legislative process. And if the bill passes the original chamber, it'll be delivered to the opposite chamber from which it originated. The exchange of bills happens halfway through the session. So this is known as crossover, and we will be going through crossover February 24th. If the second chamber passes the bill in the same form in which it was passed by the original chamber, the bill is enrolled, signed by presiding officers, and sent to the governor to be written into the Century Code. Now, after the so if the second chamber adopts the amendments to the bill and passes the bill as amended, the bill is sent back to the original chamber for introduction for concurrence. If the original chamber agrees with the changes made by the second chamber as amended, the bill is then enrolled, signed by the presiding officers, and sent to the governor. And if the chamber of introduction does not agree with the second House amendments, conference committees will be appointed. A conference committee is appointed of 3 members from each chamber to iron out the differences. And after the bill is approved by the House and Senate, the bill is enrolled, signed by the presiding officers, and sent to the governor. And if the governor chooses to sign the final bill will be sent to the Secretary of State and the bill becomes a law. Veto override and voters referral. So if the governor vetoes a bill, the Legislative Assembly can override the veto with a 2/3 majority of vote from each house. According to Article 3 of the Constitution of North Dakota, that allows any group of 25 voters to make up a sponsoring committee and gather signatures to put a bill passed by the Legislative Assembly on the ballot to ask voters to reject or support that bill. This is called referring a measure. If a majority of votes on the referred measure are affirmative, the bill is rejected and does not become law. Initiated measures of North Dakota preserve ordinary citizens' rights to make and reject laws. So any group of 25 North Dakota voters can make up a sponsoring committee, collect signatures to put a new statute or conditional provision on the ballot. This is called initiating a measure. If a majority of votes on the measure are affirmative, then the measure becomes a law. And here are a couple resources. The first one's the North Dakota Constitution. The second link here is the North Dakota Century Code, and that'll house all the bills of North Dakota. The third link here is the North Dakota Administrative Code. So if you guys want to check those out, feel free to. So now we'll discuss how does the legislature impact reservations. The first one here is the voter ID law that happened back in, I believe it was like 2018. That impacted all of Indian country in North Dakota here. And it also impacts funding, so county funding, and infrastructure and state programs. So those are just different sections that get impacted by legislature. So it's really important to get out there and, attend hearings, find out which ones are going to affect the reservations or your community, and go hard for them. So that's everything that I have to share. So thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, Charnel, for giving us a broad overview of the legislature and what is their purpose, and also talking us through how to create a bill and how a bill becomes a law. I think that's very important to understand. I would like to give everybody just an overview of what lobbying is. I will give you information about what a lobbyist is and the purpose of a lobbyist and who can lobby. And then I will talk a little bit about public testimony and what public testimony is, how you can provide public testimony, and give you some tips and tricks on preparing and submitting your testimony to the legislature. And finally, we will, after my presentation, we'll pass it over to Whitney and give us that demonstration I mentioned before. So first section here, lobbying and lobbyists. What is lobbying and who are lobbyists? What does that mean? So lobbying is defined as any attempt by individuals or private interest groups to influence the decisions of government or policymakers. The original meaning of lobbying referred to the efforts of influencing the votes of legislators in the lobby outside the chamber. So that's how the term lobbying is derived. You lobby or you talk to the legislators outside the chamber in the lobby. So that's kind of how the term originated and where it comes from. So lobbying the legislators. So a lobbyist, what is a lobbyist? A lobbyist is defined as a person who takes part in an attempt to influence legislators. There are two types of lobbyists here in North Dakota. A registered lobbyist usually represents an organization and is registered with the state of North Dakota. So that's known as a registered lobbyist. They are usually paid to be there. They're usually paid by an organization or a special interest group to be there to lobby and to engage with the legislators. The second type of lobbyist that we have here in North Dakota is the citizen lobbyist. Any citizen who lobbies at the legislature, and they're usually not paid to be there, and they're usually not registered. They are just common people who have an interest in lawmaking and who have a story to share with the legislators. So everybody has a right to lobby. All citizens of North Dakota can lobby at the North Dakota Legislative Assembly. You have that right to lobby any bill or any resolution. So a private citizen usually has a more compelling story to tell, usually has a story of impact on how the bills and the laws can impact their community. Usually that resonates a little bit better than somebody who is a paid lobbyist who is getting paid to be there. So that is a lobbyist. So here are some fun facts, some interesting facts about lobbyists. So the first thing is most people think about money when they hear the word lobbyist. Yes, that is true. Lobbyists can raise a lot of money for elected officials and their campaigns. Lobbyists can sometimes write their own laws or write their own bills and bring them to the legislators and propose them to all the elected officials and have that dialogue and connection with the elected officials. So just keep that in mind. Lobbyists can also effectively bribe outgoing legislators or politicians with lucrative job offers to become lobbyists themselves. And this is where the, in my own opinion, is kind of where the corruption happens when a politician is done serving in office, they will go to the other side and lobby for other companies and lobby for other interest groups because they have that experience with the government and the decision-making process. So politicians who walk through that revolving door are in for a huge pay raise. So that's the stigma or the corruption behind lobbyists, and that's kind of a lot of times most people think about that when they think of lobbyists. So just wanted to share some fun facts with you all about that. So why don't we ban lobbyists? Why don't we ban lobbying? Well, unfortunately, we cannot ban it. It is part of our Constitution, and we should not have to ban lobbying, and we should not have to ban lobbyists. Lobbyists are not all inherently evil or corrupt. After all, a lobbyist is just a person, whether it's a registered lobbyist or a citizen lobbyist, is there to represent their interest, whether it's the private interest group or whether it's a community interest. They are there. They all have the same rights, equal rights as everybody else who is lobbying and trying to influence the decision makers and the lawmakers. So there are many groups who do use lobbyists, groups, small businesses, large corporations, unions, and nonprofit groups all use lobbyists to help move along policy and influence the legislators. So in this section here, we want to talk about grassroots lobbying and grassroots lobbyists. So a grassroots movement is one that uses the people in a given community as the basis for a political or economic movement. Grassroots movements and organizations use collective action from the local level to create change. Grassroots movements are associated with a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down decision-making structure. They are sometimes considered more natural or spontaneous than the traditional power structures. So just a little information about what grassroots lobbying is and how we can create those movements and create that power for our communities at the grassroots level. And obviously, we want to try to inspire more grassroots lobbyists to get involved in the legislature. Grassroots lobbying uses self-organization to encourage communities to take action in representing their own interests in the legislature. Lobbying can build power for your community and can leave a lasting impact for future generations. You can be a lobbyist for your community. You belong in these public spaces, and you have the right to give input on public decision making, and you have the right to access all of the public officials that were voted in. So you know your community best. You know what affects your people. You know what impacts your friends and family. So it's important to bring your perspective and go and lobby and talk to the legislators. And I want to give a shout out to our grassroots lobbyists who are in action this session here in North Dakota. The 2023 Legislative Assembly, we have 4 individuals that we have been working with or that we have seen participating in lobbying. So the first one is Nicole Donaghy. She is from the Standing Rock Reservation. She works here at North Dakota Native Vote. She lobbies the legislature and testifies and is pretty active in the legislature. The same with Charnel Seaboy, who just previously presented. She is also a registered lobbyist here for North Dakota Native Vote. And then we have Dawn Morrison, who is also a registered lobbyist for North Dakota Native Vote. Brings a lot of experience with the legislature to the team and to our communities that we are working with. And finally, we have Colette Brown, who represents the Spirit Lake tribe, who lobbies at the state capitol. And it's always nice to run into people that we know or people that we have worked with in the past at the capitol and bring in their perspective and bringing in their stories of impact to the legislators and being able to connect with them that way. So just wanted to give them a shout out. So thank you all for lobbying and helping represent our communities and our interests. So the next section here, we're going to go over public testimony. So public testimony is defined as a formal or written, spoken or written statement. Public testimony is a way for citizens to express their opinion on an issue to the deciding committee or governing body. You have the right to testify on any bill before the North Dakota Legislative Committee. So public testimony is important. Public testimony has the potential to influence how decision makers vote on a bill or resolution. Public testimony is a powerful way to shape the outcome of policy and laws. Public testimony gives you an opportunity to share your community interests and share your stories of impact on how these bills and laws will impact your community. Remember, public officials are elected by the people. Their job is to represent you. Public testimony is a right. So in North Dakota, every bill that is proposed must have a public hearing before a legislative committee. The bill must be publicly voted upon by the committee and must come before the full House chamber or the full Senate chamber for another public vote. Your opportunity to testify on a bill comes at a committee hearing. So legislative committees will have public hearings available for all citizens, and those are hosted at the state capitol here in Bismarck, North Dakota. You can come into a committee hearing at any time, even if the door is closed, even if the hearing is in progress, you have a right to be there. You can also find hearing information on the North Dakota Legislative website, and we will talk about that a little later. So plan and prepare your testimony. So testimony can be tricky. So planning and preparing is my best advice to everybody. Be brief and do not repeat what others have already said during the committee hearing. The hearings can be informal. Try to be conversational with the committee members when you're speaking to them or providing your testimony. Avoid being too technical, using acronyms or technical language or references unless you explain what the meanings are, unless you give more context on the technical terms. Do not be nervous or do not be worried about doing something wrong. There are no rights and wrongs when it comes to testifying or providing testimony. Expect some questions from the committee members. These questions are not to embarrass you or to challenge you in any way. Sometimes the committee would like more context and more like you to elaborate on something that you may have said or a suggestion that you have made. So always be prepared for questions. And our biggest advice to people who do testimony and who do get questions, if you are not able to answer the question, that is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with not being able to answer the question. Just let the committee members know that you don't have that information available at that time, and that you will get back to them and that you will follow up with the committee members to try to answer their questions. So always good advice there when you do get questions and you don't have information available on hand. So this is my last section here. I'm just going to run through a few tips for you all. Some tips to remember about public testimony. You can look up the hearing information online. All information on public hearings will be available on the legislative website. Your testimony can be written or verbal testimony at a hearing. Try to be brief with 2 to 3 key points about the bill and how it impacts your community. If you do verbal or oral testimony, try to time yourself between 1 to 3 minutes. Always provide a copy of your written testimony or your testimony to the committee. They may need the copy of it for the public record. Try to be informative. You know your community best. Try to tell stories of impact to get your points across. Connect with your local legislators or representatives, and practice public testimony with your friends and family. Always encourage people to practice. Always read your testimony back. Try to find a small audience so that way you can kind of critique and then adjust your testimony as needed. So preparation and practice will help you with your execution and speaking your testimony to the committee. So just some tips to remember. And a couple things to caution yourself with if you do testify or if you do go to a public hearing. The biggest thing is try to avoid clapping or booing or any types of demonstrations at the public hearing. Try not to be long-winded. There may be other people and other voters or other citizens that want to provide testimony as well. Do not make accusations or do not call anybody out during your testimony at the committee hearing. And then also do not be afraid. You have a right to be there. You have a right to provide testimony. Again, the representatives and the elected officials are there to represent you and your interests. So be confident and know that you belong in those spaces. And my last slide here is follow-up. Legislative committees may not vote right after they can vote right after the hearing, or they may wait until the committee work sessions to vote on a bill. They do take into consideration your testimony and all the people who provided testimony before they vote on a bill. All committee action is public, so anytime they take an action on a bill, you can listen into the committee debate. You can listen in on how they vote on the bill, and all of this is public information. So again, it'll be posted on the legislative website, and we'll talk about that in the next presentation. And then be sure to follow up on any questions or comments that the committee members had for you. You can find their contact information on the legislative website as well. So follow up is always important, especially if you're not able to answer a question. So make sure you follow up. And here is the North Dakota legislative website for your reference. And I think that is my segue over to our next presenter. Thank you all for listening to me, and I will pass it over to Whitney here.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me to join in on the webinar. I'm really happy to be here. And I even learned some things from this webinar, so I've been enjoying it. My name is Whitney Oxendahl, and I am the lead legislative volunteer and voter guide coordinator at the League of Women Voters of North Dakota. And if you're not familiar with the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization with the mission of empowering voters and defending democracy. Here are some ways we do that. A big way is through our voter guide on vote411.org. In 2022, we covered all the candidates in the state for all the elections, which was exciting. But I'm here as part of our advocacy that we do on voting and election bills. We are using Outreach Circle for action alerts on voting and election circle, action alerts and updates on voting and election bills. So if you want to scan the QR code or download Outreach Circle, you can find those there. But now I will go over to a tour of the North Dakota legislative website. Here we are. All right. So this is the North Dakota legislative website, ndlegis.gov, or you can Google North Dakota legislature and this should come up. And this is where you are going to find that bill information. So again, a bill is a state law in the making. They are going to try to update, take out things from the law, make changes, and this is where all that information happens during session. So I am going to focus on this tab at the top called Session Information. That's where you'll find everything. And the bill information, those potential state laws are all under here, this bill information part. Click Bills and Resolutions, and you'll have the full list of bills here. There are many. Each card is one potential state law or amendment to a state law. You'll see these as I'm scrolling through. You will see the numbers, so they index these to keep them organized. HB is House Bill, so it was introduced in the House, and a 4-digit number starting with 1. If you scroll down all the way, you'll get to SB 2001, and those are all your Senate bills. And so if you know of the bill number, say there's an action alert from North Dakota Native Vote, you can just simply type in the bill number up here, and it will bring you there. Or if you are interested in something, let's say I'm interested in elections, because I'm from the League of Women Voters, I can type in elections and get a bunch of election related bills. So this is how you can search right here at the top. So I'm going to go to a bill that we have given testimony on, so I know it has had a hearing and everything. It is House Bill 1424. And as soon as you start typing up at top, it will bring you to a bill. I'm going to click on this card here. And it will tell me everything about this one potential state law, this bill, House Bill 1424, who it was introduced by, which are the legislators, the title, and the last action. So there's tabs here at the top that will tell you lots about the bills. So the version is the one if you want to see the text of the bill. Here you can click the top one, is the most recent one. And this is how a bill looks. So you have the House Bill number at the top, which legislators introduced it. And down here are the changes that they might want to make. So if you see a strike through, like so, that means they want to take that out. And if you see underline, that means they want to add that. And it even tells you what part of the North Dakota Century Code, our statutes, it's trying to change or amend. So here is what a bill looks like. They will all have this similar look to it. So when you see a few, then you can kind of get the language of bills. So I'm going to hit back and go back to the card. So we had the overview first, and then the version is where the text of the bill is. And then here are the actions. So you can see where the bill is at in the legislature. You can see which chamber it's in and the date that something happened. So it was introduced and went to a committee hearing on January 27th. And then the committee said, yeah, let's pass this. Let's give it a do pass recommendation. So they gave it a thumbs up and they sent it to the House, where it passed 83-11 and now is going to the Senate. So it's headed over to the other chamber. So this gives you a kind of a full look at where it went in the legislature. If you want to see the video of all of that I just said, you can go to this video tab. It is a great way. It's kind of fun to see how things move through the legislature. If you click on this icon over here, you can watch this. You can watch it go through that committee hearing. Here's the committee, House Political Subdivisions. And if you scroll all the way down and it just says House, you can even see how they discussed it in the whole chamber at the floor. And you can even watch the vote, which is kind of fun. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top and move on to the hearings. You can see the list of hearings it had. And then the testimony. If you feel like reading the testimony on the bill to learn more, you can go over and click the document number. Oh, here's the leagues right here. And you can see, and it's also a great way to see how testimony is written. So you can click on that and read some testimony to get a feel for that. So that's how you look at bills. Again, session information, bills and resolutions is a great way to see each of the bills and search. Another way you can do that is a special trick is going under session information and looking at the major topic index. This is the other place I search, which is great. So if you click on major topic index, if you have a topic that you are really interested in, you can click on one of these. I'm going to click on B's, and you can see the whole list of bills that are related to that topic. And so staff there does it. So, you know, some might be under topics you think it should be under others, but it's pretty good. Now, besides looking at bills, you might see one and be like, I want to give public testimony on this bill. I have something to say from myself, my family, my community, and that is also going to be under session information. So I'm going to click that again, and I'm going to go, instead of to the bill information, over to the hearing schedule. And they're going to be under this standing committee hearings tab. I'll click it, and it will think, and then pull up the hearing. Scroll down, and you can see all the bills coming to different committees. I'm going to scroll down until I get one with a hearing where you can submit testimony. So tomorrow morning at 8:30, you can submit testimony until 7:30 a.m. for this one. I'm going to click testimony. You can, if you have one you want to search for, you can click in the bill number here at the top. But I'm just going to scroll down to the first one, click submit testimony, and you can see that it's due 7:30 a.m. Here's the deadline again, but scroll down. So you put in your name, your email address, your phone number, and where you live. And so that's all they need for your contact information. But scroll down and you can put your testimony right here. If you don't feel comfortable giving testimony in person or virtually, they do have those options. You can just put written testimony in and we'll go in the record in support or in opposition to that bill. And then you want to upload, you can make your Word document a PDF and upload it right there. And then you click submit and you've submitted testimony. I always feel excited when I hit submit. I'm like, I did it. So that is, I will do a remind again. Here's your bill information under session information, bills, and then standing committee hearings is the place where you submit public testimony. And the last thing I want to highlight is just pointing up here to the video tab way at the top. If you click it, if you know a hearing is coming up, someone's talked about it, you can see any hearing coming up right here in this list. Here's the ones that were from today. You can look at the full week over here and see the week of hearings coming up. Usually the hearings for the next week come out every Thursday evening. So you can usually peek at the week ahead. And so this is where you see the video of the hearing. Because sometimes maybe you just want to check a bill, like that's your first action, getting involved with the legislature. And then maybe you want to watch a hearing and get a feel for that. And then maybe you want to submit public testimony, which I always feel is like, it feels so great to do. So that is a walkthrough of the website. So yeah, it's just a really great way to see how bills are tracked and to get involved with the legislature. So I am going to stop my share and throw it back over to Deborah.
Thank you, Whitney. We will move over to the gallery here. I'd like to ask all the panelists to go ahead and turn your cameras on. And to all of our participants who are with us tonight, you are free to ask us any questions. So again, you can use the Q&A feature to ask us questions, or you can use the chat feature to ask us any questions. So we will just open that floor to all of our participants if you want to ask a question. So. All right, it sounds like we do not have any questions from our participants tonight. I am going to send an evaluation link out to our participants. We would like to hear your feedback on the webinar, hear your feedback on how you came to be with us tonight, and we really appreciate that. We want to bring more opportunities, more webinars, more events to all of our people across North Dakota. So thank you all for being here, and that concludes our legislative webinar tonight. So thank you.